Welcome back to another episode of High Ticket Woman. I'm your host, Debbie Cottle. Today, I have a guest. This is going to be a little bit of a different interview today. I'm excited to be interviewing today Jacques Delorme, a Canadian. I got to emphasize the Canadian part because he's a fellow Canadian of mine, but he's also a science educator, a public speaker, a life coach, and the author of Driving Out of Darkness, Self-Care Strategies for Trauma Recovery. He has dedicated the past 12 years of his life to personal development, including multiple training courses. And his public speaking explains the accident that he went through that ended the life that he was living as a cyclist and the recovery from trauma that he's had to manage to be able to turn his life around. So just want to give you a disclaimer at the beginning of this episode. What you're about to hear may be very difficult and even triggering if you have experienced a similar type of trauma. Jacques, welcome to High Ticket Woman.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. So Jacques, let's just dive in. You were a cyclist. Can you
Actually, I wasn't.
just
The
weren't a
accident
cyclist.
involved the cyclist. It wasn't me as a cyclist.
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna shut up and let you tell your story. How about that?
No, it's all good. You haven't heard my story either, so this will be a first one for you too.
Yeah, and to the audience, I told him, "Don't tell me anything. I wanna have an organic response when you're telling everybody for the first time." So, yeah, I don't know. So we're all about to hear this story for the first time.
So my story, if you go back just a little bit before, like my bio, you had said, I've been in personal development for quite a few years and back in 2012. So it's been 12 years of learning about myself. I'd gone through a divorce back in my early time of personal development. So I was struggling trying to make sense of my life. And I decided that working on me was a good thing. So I did that, but that really didn't prepare me very well for what would happen later. In 2021, I got into a car accident. Those who know Canada, there's a number one highway goes across the country, high speed highway, dual lane. And that's what I was on. I was traveling east towards Winnipeg. I'm in Saskatchewan. So I'm in a different province at this point. I had left middle of the afternoon and got into Manitoba. It was dark. It was October. So it got dark early. It's 8 o'clock at night, Manitoba time. So it's pitch black, moonless night, no light to speak of other than my headlights. And I had not gotten anything to eat in a while. I had left home at 3 and I hadn't stopped for supper yet. There's a gas station on the north side of the highway. So I pulled to the left lane looking to go over and get something to eat. But this is COVID era. So everything in Saskatchewan shut down at 7 o'clock at night because nobody's out. So I don't know if this place is open. Lights are on. Nobody's walking around and there's no vehicles at this gas station. There's no town. It's just a lone gas station. So I don't think it's open. So I continue on. Highway curves slightly to the right and downhill. I come around this little curve and I never saw him in time. 24-year-old man on a pedal bike is riding in the middle of my lane and I can't avoid him. I'm going 120 kilometers an hour. Those who are American, it's about 75 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And I hit him right dead center of my car. I didn't have a chance to swerve the wheel. I didn't have a chance to hit the brakes. Nothing. I didn't have a chance at all. His body comes up over the hood of my car, smashes into my windshield, bounces up and over and lands somewhere in the highway behind me. I am in shock at this point. It's just like, yeah, I got to stop. I got to get my car stopped so I don't hit something else because I can't see a thing. My windshield's destroyed. Flying glass in the car and I can't see anything. I'm in the left lane, so I use the side of the highway out the driver's side window to figure out where I am, hit the brakes hard, come to a stop, hit my flashing lights to warn traffic behind me, and dial 911. At this point, she checks me out. I'm fine. The airbags didn't even go off because his body's not heavy enough. You have to really stop the momentum of the car to get your airbags to go off. That's how they are designed to work. And my car didn't even slow down. His body wasn't heavy enough. So no airbags. So no issue from that standpoint. And I told her I've been a long time coach and I have my emergency first aid. Why don't I at least try and go back and do something? I can't just sit here. I don't know where his body is. Could be in the middle of the highway, could be on the side, could be in a I don't know where he is. I don't know what condition he's in. She agreed. So I get out, I start walking, and oh boy, is it dark. I can't see anything. My light on my iPhone, useless, not anywhere near strong enough. And the light from the gas station is just enough to be able to see kind of where I'm going. So I'm walking back about 75 meters or so, and I see him. He's lying on the dash line in the middle of the highway, his head facing oncoming traffic. And his arm is up beside his head, so I can't see his face. So I don't know. Can't see whether or not his eyes are open. I can't see anything about him that would give me an idea of what condition he's in. I call to him, nothing. There's no movement. He's out. If he's even alive, I don't know. 911 operator warns me, don't go out there. I'm wearing a dark blue shirt, blue jeans, and it's moonless. So it's like, I didn't see him. If a vehicle comes around the curve, they're not going to see me. So she warns me not to go out there, and I stay where I am when it turns out to be a really good thing because it's less than a minute. Mid-size SUV comes around the curve. I'm thinking psychopathic. I can wave them down. I can get some help, and we can help cordon off the highway. But it's so dark, and same thing that happened to me. They don't see me, and they don't see him. The instinct when you're driving is to never hit something with your tires because you could lose control. So you do one of two things. You swerve to avoid it, or you swerve to take it between your tires. You just let it pass under the vehicle, and it's a lot safer for you driving. I don't know why they chose what they did. They swerved left, not right. And it took the body between the front tires. Problem is, it's a mid-size SUV. There's no clearance for a human body in a mid-size SUV. It's too low to the ground. So they go over them full highway speed, and it's 8 feet in front of me, right in front of me. And you hear the clunking of the body rolling under the chassis of the vehicle as it goes over full speed. Thanks to laws of physics, you take something goes through under your vehicle, and it's almost like a grabbing motion. It grabs it. It took his body and flipped him 180 degrees and sent him 7 feet in the air and 50 feet down the highway like an arrow. Launched his body following behind the vehicle after it passed over. Body eventually loses momentum, hits the ground, rolls, and stops across the right-hand lane. The vehicle that hit him initially braked for about 3 seconds and left. Hit the gas hard and left. They panicked. They didn't know what to do. They obviously knew they hit a body. It's pretty hard not to realize it's a human body. And they panicked and they left. So I'm aimlessly walking back towards my car, just not knowing what to do at this point. 911 operator went quiet for a little bit, not sure what to say. So I'm doing this play by play, telling her what's happening as it's happening. She goes, get back to your car. You're really in an unsafe position. Somebody's going to try to swerve to avoid him and puts me in danger. So I'm walking back towards my car, and it's less than a minute. I haven't even gotten to where the body is yet. And I hear something behind me and a whole lot of lights, a lot of noise. Semi with a flatbed trailer is coming around the curve. So I'm waving and yelling and screaming and trying to get his attention. But you're not going to move a vehicle that big that fast. Like, there's no way. He's coming at 100, 110, 120 kilometers an hour around that curve. And the body's in his lane. You can't move a vehicle that big that fast. And the inevitable happens because the body's across the right-hand lane. Driver's side tires take the body across the pelvis and runs over him again. So at this point, I'm like in shock, and I get back to my car, get inside. I see the semi lights through the broken windshield. I can see the semi lights, flashing lights. He'd parked up not far from my car. And I'm sitting there just kind of trying to stay calm. The 911 operator's talking to me, and I don't really remember much about what we talked about at that point. It's kind of a blur. I don't remember other vehicles. I just waited, and I eventually saw the police lights in my rearview mirror, got out to meet the EMTs and to meet them. I refused to go towards the body. I just stayed where my car was. The semi that originally had stopped left. He never stayed.
Before the police got there?
Before the police got there, he'd left. Yeah, he panicked as well, and he left. So I was the only one who asked to stop. It's not by choice. My car was in bad shape. The bike itself had ripped open the right quarter panel of my car, damaged my radiator fluid everywhere, so completely undrivable. I wouldn't have left anyway. But yeah, my car was basically incapacitated and it never left the province. I had no way of getting home. My car was done. It was totaled. And I waited for the police EMTs, ended up having a discussion with them, eventually get taken to the hospital because I had a cut on my right hand between my thumb and forefinger where I'd shoved a piece of glass into my hand and didn't even know it. Never felt it. I was bleeding down my hand the whole time and didn't even realize it. I'd been in shock at that point. So I got to the hospital, got the glass taken out, didn't even need a stitch, just a small cut, big enough to bleed, but took the glass out and then tried to figure out, what do I do now?
Wow. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you tell this story, and there's the original trauma of hitting him, and then you're re-traumatized 2 more times over, by these 2 other vehicles hitting the body. I can't even imagine what this was like for you. So what next? What happened next?
The immediate response that your brain has is to try to make sense of what happened. And that started as soon as I actually hit him before the other two even happened, the other two collision. And the what if starts right away. So what if I left home sooner? What if I had left home before 3 o'clock and then gone through that section of highway in daylight? Maybe he wasn't even there yet, or I would have seen him in time to be able to avoid him. What if I'd stopped to get food? Maybe he would have been hit by someone else, that maybe that SUV or that semi would have got him instead of me. I don't know. But all the what ifs in the world do what? Nothing. Because you can't change the past. You can't change what happened. So doing all the what ifs, all that does is beat yourself up. And I needed to
Yeah.
stop. Like that, it was hard and it took some time to kind of sort some of it out as I started to process or into that night, into the next day. Tried to have a couple of conversations with people that I knew. One was a good friend of mine who's a police officer to get an idea of the what ifs, right? On what happens to me. I just hit and that person's dead. So what now? Like, am I in trouble? Am I going to go to jail? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to get stuck in this province and not end up home? Like, I don't know what's going to happen. Police officer was really good. The corporal that came on the scene took the information from me in order to do his investigation with the accident reconstruction overnight. I told him everything, including the fact that it's a 110-kilometer-an-hour highway. I was driving 120. I admitted that, and he's like, yeah, whatever. That's normal. That's normal speed within the 10% of the speed limit, right? So he said, we wouldn't even look at you for that speed. That's not excessive speed. That's not an issue.
Yeah.
Turns out the same thing had happened less than a month ago to somebody else. And he said, that guy's going, yeah, because he was driving 150. And he hit a cyclist,
Whoa.
and that cyclist died. So he's going to jail for
Mm.
dangerous driving, etc. So he's like, that's not you. Like that's not considered excessive speed. You haven't been drinking. You don't have any drugs in your system. There's no other extenuating circumstance that would cause the accident other than it being really dark. And he's in a spot where he shouldn't be. One of the interesting things that your brain will do when you get into a lot of stress is it captures 10 times more information in a split second than it normally does. So the cover of my book is the last thing I saw before I hit him. And that's a Polaroid snapshot. Like it's a split second. Like I didn't have time to react. So it's a split second. But that image is ingrained in my brain and I can tell you minute details of everything about him before I hit him. I picked up that much information. I can tell you he was wearing white shoes. I can tell you he was wearing black sweats, a dark blue sweater with a long sleeve white shirt underneath because you could see it poking out the cuffs and it's unzipped a bit on his chest. He's looking down and
Was he facing your direction?
he's 45 degrees angle away from me. He was looking down, so I never saw his face. Short, dark hair, skinnier guy, probably in the 6 feet, maybe a little under 6 feet. And he wasn't pedaling. So we kind of put two and two together with the officer. We're kind of talking about it. And he's going, it's pretty obvious what he was doing. He was on the left-hand side of the road and he'd coasted from the left side across into my lane and waited for me. Just committing
Oh,
suicide,
death by s oh,
death by vehicle, right? So
oh,
that in itself, with the evidence we had and everything that he was able to later discover, we figured it out that yeah, this was a suicide by him, so it wasn't my fault. So that helps with part of the healing process of understanding that it didn't matter what I did. He put himself into a position where I could not miss him because his intent was he needed this to happen and it was his choice. So that helps with the healing process, but doesn't change the fact that the accident itself ended human life. And that's something that will always be on me because I was the one who, well, did it per se, not intentionally, of course, but it's something that happened as a result, right? So it's, yeah, I feel for him, but at the same time, it didn't have a lot to do with me. So now it's me trying to figure out how do I get through the process of getting better and dealing with the memory in some way because
yeah,
it's causing me all sorts of issues in my life. Like
yeah,
it took me
yeah,
months to get to a point where I could actually even talk about the accident because it was
yeah.
traumatic.
So you were obviously yeah. So you were obviously diagnosed with PTSD.
Yeah, I was never diagnosed with it, but it's pretty obvious I had it. Yeah,
We obviously had
didn't need
yeah.
the doctor to tell me that.
So, yeah, so anybody who has had PTSD knows exactly what you've experienced, but for those who haven't, can you describe, you know, just sort of the phases that you went through, like the early days, um, reliving the trauma and everything. Just what did what were those early days after the accident like for you? I'm sure you weren't sleeping at all.
Surprisingly, sleep that night was sporadic. It took a while
Yeah.
to get to sleep, and it was like in half-hour
Yeah.
spurts, maybe 3 hours total times, out of sheer exhaustion more than anything.
Yeah, you
As
would
long as
just
I'm
shut
awake,
down.
yeah, as long as I'm awake, it's a stress level of a 6 or a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10. Constant. And it's that ball of lead that sits in your sternum and your lower they need just above your stomach, but below your heart in that area, in your
Yeah.
sternum area,
Yeah.
that just sits there and won't go away. If you've ever been under a lot of stress, you know what that little feeling feels like. Mine was accentuated and it never went away. It stayed there. Triggers were basically anything triggered me to go to a 10.
Yeah.
Any little stress, anything that would normally add a little bit of stress to your life, like somebody cuts you off in traffic, which is pretty minor. Somebody sends an email, it's a little bit more scathing at work, for example. Any of those little things that tend to get your blood boiling a little bit, that is enough to send me to a 10 and want to just go home, crawl under my bed sheets and hide. I needed to escape. I was trying to escape the pain and it was constant. It just couldn't get that memory to stop, couldn't get that feeling to stop. Couldn't get my brain to stop doing what we call monkey mind, where your brain just goes 100 miles an hour and just won't stop. And it's just one thing after another after it's just a cyclic processing of your brain trying to make sense of it. But it's at the same time your reptilian brain trying to protect you. So anything, for example, like somebody riding a bike on the side of the road is a major problem, especially if it's darker out. Now, lucky for me, the cyclists I saw within my city when I'm trying to drive are actually on the side of the road, but not at night. I didn't actually see one at night, which is a good thing. But even having them on the side of the road, I immediately go to the furthest lane away from them, slow down to almost a crawl, and then as soon as I get even with them, hit the gas and just get away from them. That's the kind of reaction I had. Somebody wearing dark clothing walking on a sidewalk was a problem. It's the dark clothing part and just fearful of them jumping out in front of my car. Like a fear of that same incident happening again. It's not logical because people don't do that for the most part, right? Mine's a little bit of a freak accident, but you don't find people jumping off a sidewalk and going in front of a car. Yes, it has happened, but it's
Right.
so
No,
rare.
absolutely.
So it's not a logical response by my brain, but it's my brain trying to protect me. I'm driving to work the one day. I actually only took a week off of work, which I'll explain why in a second. I was driving to work. I go to work in the morning and it's early enough. It's still dark. So I'm driving down a street and a flash of light from the street light in a shop window is enough to make me jump because it's unexpected. I didn't, and it's like something jumping out in front of me. front of my car. So I'd flash. And it's enough to send me into a panic. So it was difficult to actually function for the most part on a lot of days, to control my mind, to control my reaction to things that were happening, because everything was always so negative. It was the negative part that became very disruptive to my life. So getting to work, that piece, I was off work for a week just to deal with, I needed a car. My parents came and got me in Manitoba and got me home. I had their car for a bit, but I didn't have a car of my own, so I needed to replace it. So I had to deal with insurance because my car's in a different province. I had to deal with the insurance piece in a different province. So my province had to deal with an out of province vehicle, and they're used to that. I am not. So it was a learning curve, and trying to do it under stress, trying to buy a car when you're under stress is not the easiest thing in the world. And I took any deal that
Trying to do anything under stress is not easy.
So it's eventually got a car. It actually, well, I had a car within a few days. Like that process actually was extremely quick. My accident was a Wednesday night. By Friday, 6 p.m., I had the vehicle assessed, completed, money in my bank account in 2 days.
That's quite remarkable, actually.
That's
They really came through.
I talked to a lady, said, "This is what I went through."
They must have said this man needs something. Yeah. He needs something to go his way. We've got to.
Yeah. So at least that was a good thing. I had a car by the following Monday.
Told them the whole details of.
Yeah, I told the fellow that, you know what,
And you told that
you should.
Yeah.
Understand, this is the pressure I'm
Yeah.
under. I'm not going to be interested in having any sort of a disagreement of any kind. I need this process to be done. And she fast tracked it.
Yeah.
She grabbed it and just went with it fast. Right?
Yeah.
That was a good thing.
Yeah. Well, good for her. Whoever you are, lady. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow.
So getting back to
Amazing.
work was actually part of a defense mechanism for me to be able to survive my days. Taking time off of work and being at home means, what am I doing? Nothing. What have I got to occupy my brain every day at home when I'm not working? My kids, I have half time, but they're in school during the day. So it's like, yeah, I've got nothing to do. That's a problem. I did that whole week and realized that I need some way of keeping my mind distracted and helping me get through this. I told only my boss at work. Nobody else knew. So I have cubicle land at work. So I'm in a cubicle with other cubicles around our floor. So I go to work, I could be in a cubicle and be alone. And people don't normally come to my desk for much. They mostly email or text or whatever to get information that they need. So I can work alone without an issue. But my problem was, if I suddenly needed human contact, being at home alone, I don't have that. Being at work, I could leave my cubicle, go and find an excuse to go talk to someone, to have that human contact, that human connection, to settle myself down if I'm having a little bit of a rough patch, and then just go back to being alone again, back at my desk. So it was, for me, the best of both worlds of trying to keep my mind occupied, having human contact. But it was also really hard not telling anyone because no one knew other than my boss. And I was given free rein by my boss that if I needed to go, I didn't need to explain why. I didn't need to say anything. Just walk in into her office at this point and to say, I need to go. Done. I've got sick leave. I can go. That only happened twice.
Yeah.
So I did find that work was a little bit of a safe haven for me to try to control things with my brain. And then it was a matter of, okay, what do I do beyond that? That helps a bit, but how do I start to deal with what happened? That became a bigger story on trying to get past it now.
So before you go into that, I just want to sort of touch base on, when we go through an acute trauma like this, and everything was triggering, you were saying, and there was so much fear. I mean, and I know this went on well beyond just the initial days. What were the accompanying thoughts? Because these things are tandem, right? Like what we're feeling is so intense, and it's activating our sympathetic nervous system, the fight, flight, freeze, response. But you had a whole lot of thinking that was going on, that was, you know, paralleling the emotions. What were you telling yourself in those initial days?
One of the things that happened when I first came back, I have a cousin who lives across the street from me, and I have a really good friend who's like within a 2-minute drive. I had the two of them together to tell them what happened and to be able to put some trust in them that they would understand and be able to have somebody as sounding board, yeah, as another way of putting it, I guess. Where one of the things that men will do is, I don't want you to solve my problem. What I want you to do is listen. And it's like getting advice from people. It's like, yeah, and they don't understand. Like, who experiences what I went through? Who's ever been through that? The guy could really turn to say, okay, hey, what did you do to get through it? There is nobody. So to have others who hopefully understand at least a little bit and to be able to listen. In talking to them, one of the things that became pretty clear very quickly was my language. One of the things that I would say is that I killed somebody in an accident. But when you hear that word kill, there's that preconceived notion of what that means, right? Like to slay, to slaughter, to murder, right? It's the negative connotation that comes with that word, but it also implies premeditation and something very evil. Part of my fear of going through my life at that point, and the reason why I didn't tell anyone, is that fear of being labeled a killer. I didn't want people's perception of me to change because I'm very, very affectionate, very emotional, especially for a guy. Um, I'm very kind-hearted. I'm very generous. I give to others freely, that sort of thing. So that's part of my personality. So this is so counter to who I am that I would suddenly be labeled something that's so negative, and it scared me a lot. So I told very few people. My family knew, my immediate family, couple of cousins, couple of friends, my boss at work, and that's where the list stops. I didn't tell anybody. I kept it to myself, and I tried to do the male thing, the whole alpha male mentality that society gives, where you suck it up, you deal with it, you don't show emotion. The whole
Strong silence. Yeah.
strong silence, right? The old John Wayne,
I could do this. You could
character, right?
right through. Yeah.
And it's,
Yeah.
but yes, realistically, having never been through something like this, I saw myself automatically gravitate to that because that was the way that I've always pictured men as I grew up. And that's the whole stigma of the male persona that we have in society. And that came back to bite me in the butt because it's like I didn't tell people. I wasn't able to get that release of that pent up energy and that pent up emotion. I needed to find a way of getting that out and finding a way of dealing with what happened. It only took a few days after the accident that I was speaking to my real estate coach, which is the reason why I was going to Winnipeg. I was going to visit a real estate coach that I'd hired, and I was spending a day with him the next day on Thursday. This was a Wednesday night accident. I called him that night and said, I'm not going to be able to make it. Here's what happened. And he has a life coach who has a side business of doing neuro linguistic programming as well as part of her practice. And I was recommended to her. So I spoke with her and we met a few times. And I went through a process of using NLP to try to come to terms with what happened. So for those not familiar with it, it's a way of using visualization and language within your head to be able to come to terms with something that you're struggling with. And for me, the struggle with the triggers they were doing was putting me back into the same state I was in when the accident happened. So my blood pressure would be up. My heart rate would be up over 120. My normal resting heart rate's in like high 40s, 50. Being somebody's in shape, it's quite low. And it would easily jump me up double. And that was a problem because it was affecting my central nervous system. So the memory itself was impacting me physically as well as mentally. Trying to get my body to calm down is one of the things that we were trying to do. So by assimilating the memory into me and being able to come to terms with having a separation between what my brain is doing and what my physical reaction is doing, and trying to create a bit of a separation there. Eventually over
Now, what was the name of the treatment again? You said NLP?
NLP, neuro linguistic programming. Right? It's a little bit like CBT or CBT, right? Cognitive behavioral theory. There's a lot of that are similar too, right? And I found it
Yeah.
really, really helped to slowly over time. I took a 10,000-foot view to start, but I would redo the accident. And as soon as I start to get triggered, I would step away, calm my body down, calm my mind down, come back, take another view, a little bit more of the accident from a very high point of view. And slowly over time, by doing that, regulating the way that I was reacting, the way that I was feeling, I was able to slowly get to a point where I could stand on the side of the highway and reenact the accident without having a huge reaction to what had happened. So slowly by doing that over and over,
How long did that process take you?
um, it took me 10 sessions to get to a point where I was comfortable with how I was doing it, and I just kept doing it. It took me 10 months before I got to a point where I could talk about the accident to a lot of other people. I slowly been telling people, but it was very selective because of my fear of the reaction. I had some negative reactions, which set me back, and I stopped talking again. So those sort of things, like people don't know how to react, right? That's part of the issue.
Right.
People don't know what to say. They hear my story is like your reaction is like, holy crap. Like, and it's like, what do you say to the person? Like, and part of the fear people have is triggering you. They didn't want to talk about it, so they're fearful of, is he going to go into an all-out collapse, be in tears, and I'm going to impact him because of what happened? When in reality, that's not as big a concern once you get later into the healing. So after 10 months, I got to a point where it's like, okay, I need to start to dig into the story more. And I started writing my book. And I wrote it, started at the end of August. So it was almost a little over 10 months, 10 and a half months after. Wrote it and self-published and released it by the following February. So it was out, and okay, now the story's really out. And I started telling more people, and I made the decision that this story can help others. And that's when I became a professional life coach. I started doing more looking at speaking. Speaking didn't start for a while. I didn't start until last September of last year, 2023. So it was a couple of years before I got to a point where I was comfortable with my story and talking about the recovery and talking about what I did to try to get better. And it's at that point that I started talking more. And the more I did it, the more I was more comfortable with it. I was comfortable with people knowing my story. I still don't get great reactions at times. There are people who will look me in the eye and just they can't process that. They can't understand how could you have gone through that and not be a mess. And they find it different.
Okay, so they're not judgmental or critical of you, but they're just sort of traumatized themselves for you. That yeah,
Yeah, and that is part of it. That's part of why you had to do the disclaimer at the beginning saying that, okay, if this is something that
yeah.
you find is very triggering, is very difficult to hear, they leave for 5-10 minutes, wait till the story's over and come and get the rest of it. The rest of the story is, as Harvey would say in the radio.
Well, you wish, yes.
And just to get the idea.
So what is your I mean, you do you're now like a professional. You haven't given up your career, your previous career, right?
No.
Okay, so you do this on the side, but you have a goal or a mission, obviously, through your public speaking and eventually your life coaching. And, I mean, I think the obvious thing is that you wanna help people through trauma, but is there a specific sort of message that you want to communicate to people, either who've been through trauma or will experience trauma in the future?
The last two-thirds of my book, I guess, once you get through the story itself is very quick in my books and within the first 35 pages. The rest of the book is about what did I do after that? What was my experience beyond the accident itself to get better and get to a point where I can manage my life again? One of the things I came to realize, I went through NLP. I actually was with a psychologist for a while. But one of the things that's just the nature of the beast with dealing with your mental health is that your appointments are not every day. You can't. You can't take somebody's time like that, right? So you're going once a week, once every 2 weeks. What do you do on the days between? What does your normal life look like beyond therapy? What do you do to put your life back together? And that's where I dug into that. And part of that's the personal development I did for several years. but that really didn't prepare me to the extent of what I needed to now. So I had to learn new skills. I had to reach out to people who have that ability to be able to how to manage your brain, how to manage your mind, being mindful, finding ways of being in the present and not living in the past. That was one of the bigger ones, is to not dwell on this happened. Okay, this is a part of who I am. How do I move forward? How do I get beyond that feeling? How to get beyond that mindset of I'm a terrible person. I just killed somebody, right? Getting beyond that. And that's where I got into the whole self care part of it. And that's when my book goes into a fair bit of detail on here are the different pieces of what I tried. Some stuff worked, some stuff didn't, but I was persistent. I refused to allow myself to crumble. I didn't want to end up in a situation where depression got so bad that I got suicidal. I've been suicidal in my past. Not fun. Do not want that again. And recognize that and fought that tooth and nail. Refused to go back there. So I understood that and worked really hard on finding ways to get better. One of the things that became forefront right away was that my mornings were always bad. And part of that comes from two things. Obviously, the experience is going to impact my brain, but what does your brain do overnight? Your brain works from a subconscious level on whatever you thought of the last 5 minutes before you fall asleep. So if I'm thinking about the accident, that's never going to be a good result. My morning's not going to be good. So I need to give my brain something else. It's a proven fact in research that you can't be grateful for things in your life and have a negative train of thought at the same time. They're yin and yang. They cannot exist together. So by going through a grateful process, like being grateful for 5 things in my day before I go to sleep and concentrate on those things, concentrate on this is what I'm excited about in my life. This is what I'm looking forward to. I'm grateful for my kids. I'm grateful for the fact that I live in a comfortable home. I'm grateful for the sunshine. I'm grateful for the smell of coffee. It's like all these different things. So by being grateful, I stop that negative spin that my brain is doing before I go to sleep. So I meditate and do grateful comments, grateful process, as I call it, before I go to sleep. First thing in the morning, I do it again. I can't start my day with a really negative attitude because my day just goes to like the crap and it goes to hell in a handbasket in a hurry. And it was doing that the first several weeks until I learned that I could control that. It's on me to control my mind. My mind doesn't control me. So I needed to find a way of calming it down and getting it to stop. So first thing in the morning
You know
is
what I like about what I like about what you just said is, everybody talks about, oh, keeping a gratitude journal, and it's almost become, this sort of trite thing. Like, yeah, 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 I know, be grateful. But you just given a almost scientific explanation for why it's so important to focus on being grateful. If you don't give your brain something to actually think about that's positive, it will revert back to the negative because for you, what you experienced was so traumatic and so embedded in at the cellular level in terms of your memory that your brain was going to default back to that unless you forced it to think about something else.
yes. And that's the mindfulness, right? It's like we talked
Mhm.
about earlier that the reptilian brain is designed to protect you. Well, how does it do that? It warns you. It warns you. It's a negative, negative,
Yeah.
negative, whole negative spin
Wait.
trying to
Yeah.
protect you. It's while your brain is designed. It's the reptilian brain, for those not familiar with it, is the brain that originally developed back when human species developed. And it's the same one that the reptiles have. And it's the one that warns you that, there's tall grass. There could be a saber-toothed cat there. There could be a bear. There could be a rattlesnake that could bite you. And it's that warning, warning, warning. But it's always negative, right? It's always a negative result. So you need to control that piece in order to be able to move forward. So the grateful process that I use, I being grateful every morning, 5 things right in my journal. What am I grateful for? And one of the things I would do is always write, today is a great day because, and finish the sentence. So it gives me something to look
Love
forward
that.
to.
Today is a great day because, yeah,
Something to look forward
very cool.
to.
Where are you at now? Yeah. Where are you at now, Jacques, in this process? I mean, this happened a few years ago. You've done a lot of self-care, a lot of healing, and you've talked about the accident publicly now for a while. Where are you at in your own recovery from trauma?
Does the memory haunt me? No, but I'm also very careful not to dig into the emotions of the accident too deeply. If I do that, it becomes too real and I put myself back there. So I'm careful not to do that. You'll notice with the description I gave you, if you read my book, I go through a whole, every few paragraphs, there's a snapshot of what's in my brain. And I do a little snapshot of, okay, what was my brain thinking at that point in time? I couldn't go back and read my own book without probably triggering myself because I go too much into the emotion of the event itself. If I stay factual within how I describe it, without going too much into what my brain is doing, I'm okay. But as soon as I start going, this is where my brain was, this is how I was thinking at this point when the accident, during that whole accident sequence, that can be problematic.
Puts you back
Very
in that.
deep, right? Yeah, it's a dangerous place for me to go back to. I got done some with that. I've done a little testing with that because I do want to at some point do a presentation with more of the emotional piece. I tried that once and it was difficult, but it's one I want to explore a little more because I am more comfortable, obviously, with the accent. I've done a lot of these presentations. This is like number 51 and since September. So I've gotten used to my story, which helps. But the more I contact other people, the more I hear positive things from others saying, you've got a fantastic story and I've learned so much that you can go through a really crappy incident that could be really traumatizing and you can still come out the other side in one piece. There is hope. There is light on the other side.
I think there is absolutely hope, and your story speaks to that completely. You mentioned at the very beginning when you're just describing the accident, the piece of glass in your hand, and while that piece of glass might have been just a very simple cut, and the glass is pulled out. I often use that analogy when I talk with clients about trauma, because when we go through some sort of serious accident like that, we can have embedded glass. And I think of emotional trauma as embedded glass because all our other injuries can heal and we can be seemingly fine, but that trauma is still inside of us and it's working its way out like those pieces of glass, and it's going to come out as it's ready to come out. We don't get to call the shots on that. So, and that pain as that piece of glass emotionally starts to work its way to the surface, there's pain involved, but the body protects that until it's ready to push it out.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say that because you are where you're at in your journey and your journey is not over. And you yourself know that. That's part of the reason why you're out here sharing and talking about your story. It's partly your own healing process, but it's also really paying it forward and helping other people who have experienced or potentially will experience some sort of acute trauma, not your story specifically, but their own. Jacques, as we come close to the end here, tell us how someone can hear more from you. I'm assuming your book is on like Amazon. They could go get the book there.
Yeah. It's available on Amazon around the world. Barnes and Noble in the States also has it.
Okay, cool.
I did a little revision to it, which is live now. I did a change to the cover a bit and a couple of little pieces in the book, but for the most part, it's the same one. Yeah, it's
Okay.
available to be shipped anywhere in the world from Amazon. No big deal. It's available here in my city, obviously, for those listening from Regina, Saskatchewan. I I am online. I've taken a little bit of a break on social media, but you can easily contact me there. And I always respond to people who send a message to me, like a DM, a direct message through either TikTok or Instagram. I have a Facebook page. All of them have the same name, which is the title of my book. Driving Out of Darkness. Driving Out of Darkness
Yeah.
is on all three. Well, not the ad on Facebook because it's Facebook group, but yeah, and my book also has a link to like other materials. There's a website for it, drivingoutofdarkness.com again. So I use that as to make it easy for people to remember. and it's easy to get a hold of me if people want to have a discussion, even a deeper discussion on other things I've done, questions they have on how do I adapt this into my life, sort of thing, and resources. I was a voracious reader back in 2021. I read 56 books in 1 year, and the vast majority around personal development. So I've got a wealth of knowledge and background for trying to deal with different pieces of my life. I didn't deal with just the accent, I dealt with everything else too. So there's a much bigger story to what I did afterwards. It's kind of a catalyst that started me on a long journey. If people want to
Yeah.
contact me, by all means, contact me through any of those sources and send me a message. And I'm more than willing to talk to anyone who may want to find, okay, what resources do you have? What sorts of things can you help me with? And I have no problem doing that.
Yeah. We'll put some of those links to contacting you in the description of the episode. Jacques, what you've been through is absolutely remarkable. And for you to be able to sit here and talk openly and candidly about your experience is tremendous. And I thank you deeply for being willing to come on here and do that because somebody out there ha- needs what you're needs what you're sharing, right? They've been through something like this. Maybe they're struggling deeply, and what you've gone through in your book and what you're sharing through your public speaking is exactly what they need to put them on their own path to healing. So thank you so much for being a guest today.
Well, thanks so much for having me and allowing me to share my story.
Absolutely. Ladies, that's it for today's episode. But if you are dealing with something deeply traumatic, whether it's an acute trauma or chronic trauma, as so happens to so many people as well, reach out and get help. Whether you reach out to Jacques, whether you reach out to me, whether you reach out to somebody else who has the experience and the know how to help you through this process, don't let your experience with trauma prevent you from living period, but also living the best possible life that you can live because there is a way back. There is a way back from trauma. It's one step forward, daily, one step at a time. It's a process. It's not necessarily always easy, but it is very, very doable. And that's it for today, ladies. Don't forget to go get your free guide from my website, debbiecottle.com, the 10-step relationship rescue roadmap. I'll see you next week on next week's episode.